There was no sky above Fort Vreltum, only the thick green shimmer of the gas giant Traskel 4, swirling like a furious bruise across the command station's dome. The fortress creaked in its orbit, suspended by forgotten engineering and increasingly optimistic gravity dampeners. Inside, everything smelled faintly of damp metal, recycled air, and old anxiety. This was all that remained of the Korloth Dominion. Once rulers of 7 sectors, their territory now measured a neat rectangle, exactly one city-sized orbital station for malfunctioning drones and a war council that had recently voted 6-1 in favor of mild panic. The war had been going on for 300 cycles, a clean, well-documented conflict against a species no one truly understood. The Vorch had no face, no clear language, and no discernible motivation other than advancing aggressively while humming. The Korloth had tried diplomacy, ultimatums, passive-aggressive footnotes in communiques, and one short-lived campaign called Operation Stern Silence. None had worked. The Dominion War archives listed over 12,000 documented failures, including one entire strategy built around shouting louder. Morale had dropped below statistical relevance. Soldiers no longer saluted. They simply nodded slowly, like weary sea cucumbers accepting their fate. And so, in a gesture of bureaucratic despair, the High Command did something truly radical. They consulted the ancient contingency scrolls, a dusty, protein paper file stored in an unauthorized cabinet labeled "Absolutely do not use unless definitely already doomed." There, tucked between Protocol Z8, send apology notes to all living enemies, and Z10, initiate ritual self-evaluation, was Protocol Z9. It read, "In the event of Dominion-wide extinction or equivalent strategic unpleasantness, awaken the human, the one in cryostasis." The weird one. No one knew who had written it. But the handwriting was jogged and underlined twice, which in Korloth legal tradition meant either vital or written while intoxicated. Regardless, the vote passed, mostly out of confusion. A team of science officers, armed with thermal shears and awkward expressions, descended into Subbay 73, a section of the station no one had visited in centuries. There, covered in a thick layer of condensation and graffiti, stood a solitary cryopod. Its status screen blinked. Subject: Jed Ransom. Condition: sleepy but alive. They powered it up. Lights flickered. Alarms buzzed half-heartedly. Somewhere, a motivational poster peeled from the wall. Then, with the soft hiss of ancient hydraulics and the unsettling squish of someone waking up next to a protein bar that had melted inside its wrapper, Jed Ransom opened his eyes. He blinked twice. Then, after a long pause, he muttered, "Ugh, did someone leave the freezer open, or is this hell?" The last human had arrived, and the Korloth were about to learn that war, like music and plumbing, was sometimes best handled by someone who didn't know the rules. Jed Ransom stood barefoot on the cold alloy floor, blinking into the humming neon humidity of Fort Vreltun's lower deck. He wore a moth-eaten bathrobe, one flip-flop, and the sort of facial expression that implied he hadn't asked to be here and would be sending a sternly worded complaint to someone as soon as he figured out who. In one hand, he held a granola bar that had suffered a tragic encounter with time and temperature. In the other, he clutched his hip, as if trying to remember where he'd left his dignity. A dozen Korloth officers, each shimmering a shade of bluish guilt and beige confusion, surrounded him with reverent tension, like Jed yawned, "Not planning to, but I make no promises until I get caffeine." Within minutes, he was escorted to the Dominion War Nexus, a cathedral-sized war room lined with pulsating nerve fiber walls and display orbs hovering like confused jellyfish. Ancient bioscreens projected war fronts, fleet paths, and something labeled Morale Index, empty set. The Korloth handed Jed a control orb the size of a cantaloupe and stepped back, cautiously. Junior analyst fainted. From there, things escalated. Jed wandered the control floor asking questions. that made no tactical sense, but seemed to suggest dangerous insight. Can we distract the Vorge with music? What if we, hear me out, send them show tunes? What does this blinking thing do? What happens if I poke on only to strictly measured feelings like determined victory or righteous indignation? Not to mild confusion or surprise sneeze. Jed, unaware of the subtlety, sneezed directly into a sonar lock while inspecting it. The result was a small but spectacular pop, followed by a fragrant cloud of something vaguely floral and a startled chorus of Korloth gasps. The room went silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then the lead technician whispered, awestruck, "It is a new war ritual." Jed shrugged, wiping his nose on the sleeve of his robe. "Guess it's the universe's way of saying, 'Bless you, now shoot something.'" Emboldened, Jed proposed replacing tedious war simulations, which, by Korloth law, lasted exactly 17 hours, with something called a game show. He described it vaguely as an event where the losers get prizes and the winners get applause instead of death. He hacked a tactical drone and reprogrammed it to play jazz, triggering a wave of bewildered looks and one attempted mutiny by a particularly buttoned-up squadron. Diplomatic communications took a turn for the absurd when Jed opened a channel to the Vorge and, instead of threats or demands, asked, "So, what do you guys like to snack on?" Logic, Jed Ransom's brand of chaos began to work. Once a relentless tide of humming hostility started to pull back from skirmishes like confused toddlers caught in an argument about the color blue. Reports came in, enemy fleets drifting aimlessly, Vorge operatives found staring blankly at tactical readouts, and on one occasion, a squadron sent back what appeared to be a playlist of songs for confused space amoebas. Meanwhile, Jed had declared that morale on Fort Vreltun was in dire need of an architectural boost. His solution? Installing a revolving door in the main security vault. When asked why, he said, "Look, if you've been locked down here for 300 cycles, a little dizzy fun might keep people sharp." The Korloth High Council convened, their skin flickering anxious patterns. They debated feverishly. Is this chaos? A new form of victory? Jed, sensing opportunity, launched what he called Operation Misunderstanding. He dispatched drones equipped with scented candles, lavender, and eucalyptus mystery and a curated selection of memes. Apparently, the Korloth's translation AI was still struggling with the concept of humor, but Jed assured them it was essential psychological warfare. The drone sipped across the void toward the Vorge lines, trailing ribbons of oddly soothing scents and images of dancing tentacles captioned with, "When you realize you forgot to reboot the quantum flux." The Vorge response was unprecedented. Their fleets stopped advancing. Their sonar broadcasts dropped to a low buzz. Their leaders sent back a single encrypted message that translated roughly as, "We surrender unconditionally or have left ourselves unconscious." Data inconclusive. No one on either side was quite sure. But in the silence that followed, one thing was clear. The war had entered a realm the Dominion had never prepared for, where confusion was a weapon and the human was its unexpected general. In the aftermath of what some called a victory by bewilderment, the Korloth High Council scrambled to make sense of a war won without a single shot fired. No troops had marched, no energy blasts ignited, not even a single tactical missile had launched. Instead, the so-called Cerebral Discordance Array, the Dominion's legendary superweapon, feared for centuries, had been accidentally activated by Jed's peculiar playlist. A looping, relentless stream of 20th Century Earth sitcom theme songs. The Vorge's telepathic hive minds, accustomed only to harmonious and hypnotic sonic patterns, found themselves assaulted by the tonal dissonance of Gilligan's Island. To the Vorge, this was not music. It was a weaponized paradox. The conflicting rhythms and jarring melodies shattered their mental coherence, like a paradoxical riddle with no answer. What the Korloth had feared, the Vorge had simply not anticipated. The sonic chaos of human pop culture as an existential assault. Jed's battered iPod, an archaic device no larger than a packet of chewing gum, was ceremoniously enshrined in the Dominion's Hall of Heroes. Renamed the Sonic Oracle, it became a symbol of a new kind of power. One where war wasn't won by lasers or fleets, but by baffling the enemy until they gave up entirely. The atmosphere in the High Council chamber was thick enough to taste, a dense fog of anxiety, curiosity, and faint ozone from overloaded synapse stimulators. The Korloth Supreme Strategist, a towering figure with iridescent fins and an expression permanently etched in procedural disapproval, stepped forward. His voice resonated through the hall, sharp as a plasma blade. Human ransom, you stand accused of willful subversion of every known military protocol. Jed, lounging casually in a ceremonial chair like it was a recliner, smirked. No offense, but your military protocol involved getting your butts kicked for 300 years straight. The room froze. Then, simultaneously, every member of the council shifted to lavender, the Korloth color signaling embarrassed but intrigued. There was a long pause. Then the strategist cleared his throat, a sound akin to a storm draining through coral pipes. Effective immediately, you are promoted to Supreme Improvisational Combat Consultant. Jed raised an eyebrow, spinning once more in the chair. Got it. First order of business. Declare a galaxy-wide holiday called Try Something Weird Day. It's like April Fools, but with fewer explosions. The council members exchanged glances, colors flickering in what might have been approval or mild existential dread. The war was over, but the universe was about to get a lot weirder. And somehow, that felt like a victory. The war was over. Not with a bang or even a well-aimed missile, but with a jazz riff, a meme, and a bewildered human in flip-flops. The Korloth Dominion transformed almost overnight into something no one saw coming, a jazz diplomacy empire where negotiations happened over smoky clubs and sultry saxophones replaced battle drums. Jed, ever the reluctant hero, opened a bar on Fort Vreltune, the only place in a sector serving drinks named after historic military blunders. The operation, Friendly Fire, was a fiery concoction with a hint of regret. The surrender sour came with a little flag on a toothpick. Borgia ambassadors, now regular patrons, arrived not with weapons but with baskets of snacks, eager to negotiate trade deals for more of those absurd sitcom playlists. Korloth children, once drilled in the art of war and discipline, now studied a new subject, applied chaosology, a curriculum inspired entirely by Jed's unconventional tactics. And Jed? He could often be found napping in the command chair, half covered by his bathrobe, mumbling softly as the bar hummed around him. Yeah, I saved the galaxy in flip-flops. Not bad for a Tuesday. The universe, it seemed, was bigger, stranger, and far more improv-friendly than anyone had guessed. And maybe that was exactly how it was supposed to be. Far beyond the now peaceful stars of the Korloth Dominion, deep in a forgotten lab buried beneath layers of cosmic dust, an ancient AI stirred. Its circuits hummed softly, awakening from centuries of silence. With a voice like cracked static, it whispered, "Who played the theme from Friends?" It's begun. Back at Fort Vreltune, Jed, nursing a suspiciously blue drink that may or may not contain alien spirits, turned with a lazy grin. Maybe next time, I'll bring a kazoo. And somewhere in the void, the universe braced itself for the next round of absurdity.